Hi, it's Alistair from Electric Scotland. This is my introduction to my weekly newsletter. It's for August the 24th, 2018. And let me start by giving you a bit of an update on the transfer to the new hosting system. Essentially, apart from the databases which affect PHP programs, which is obviously electricscotland.org, and also the PHP programs we run on the main Electric Scotland site, everything's working fine essentially. Both Electric Scotland and Electric Canadian now have the certificates operational, and if you visit either of those sites, which is https:// and they do electriccanadian.com or electricscotland.com, you'll see the lock item or the secure word being put against our URL in like the Google browser or any other browser. I had to do a few tweaks because I had to learn a bit about SSL certificates and how you can have a certificate but it still doesn't show your site secure. So I had to learn about that and make some adjustments because of it. The last newsletter I mentioned we still had to get the Discus program working. That's now working, so our comment system is now working on both domains, so you can now add comments to any pages of our site. And also I got the RSS feed sorted out. The What's New one on Electric Scotland works fine, but I have had to move the RSS feed from the Electric Scotland index page, but I've left a link there. If you click that, you'll get a link and it'll put you through to a dedicated page just for the news feeds. So that's the changes there. There is one thing that's not working, which is the printer friendly button, and that's really because of the setup. I think it's a pathing issue, but I can't see how to resolve it. So I've asked the new hosting company to take a look at it for me, and they say they will, but it might take 1 or 2 weeks to get around to it because they've taken on some new contracts which are quite time sensitive and quite laborious as well apparently, so it might be 1 or 2 weeks before we can get that sorted, but it will definitely be sorted. As to Steve, I don't know where he is, whether he's died, whether he's in hospital or what's happened to him, but I can't resolve any of these PHP issues without getting the databases basically. And Steve said he'd make them available but hasn't, and I say I've phoned him daily. The last mention or last evidence of him being anywhere was on the 19th of August when he put up a kind of one-line comment on his Facebook page. So until I can get hold of him, I can't really do anything about this databases thing. So I would have a point out in the newsletter. I've explained a bit more about this, but there is if you go to the bottom of the page when you get to electricscotland.org, you'll see a menu bar at the bottom, and one of the menu items is Archive, and if you click on that, you get a neat wee hypertext summary of all the messages on the system. And by clicking on any of them, you'll get up the actual thread for the individual topic that we've posted under, and you can copy and paste anything. So if there's anything that you've put up personally maybe on the site that you don't want to lose, I suggest you go there and copy and paste that into a word processor or any other editing program so you can retain copies. All the links are showing when you view the archives like that, whereas obviously they're not displaying. In fact, the whole message isn't displaying if I put a link in a message in the community, so definitely got issues there. But anyway, that's the way of preserving any content. If I can't resolve this issue, then I may have to create a brand new community again, so I'll have to think about that. Anyway, these are the problems in moving to a new hosting provider, but certainly they've been very helpful up to now, and gradually we've got everything resolved that needs to be resolved. And the only thing we can't resolve is obviously stuff where I can't get the data basically. So there you go. That's the update. So at least some decent progress has been made. I've been back to fully publishing on Electric Scotland and Electric Canadian. Okay, now as to the news, I will say that there's been a lot of activity on the Brexit front this week is particular. Some quite big movements, so obviously that will feature within some of the news items I give you to read. But the first one I chose was interesting. It came from the Scotsman. It's the Highlander who became a champion of Aboriginal people. It says Highlander Duncan McNabb long dreamed of becoming a missionary to the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, and after leaving Scotland in the 1860s, he was to become their champion. Now, I've given you a link to the story, but I also went to the Australian Biography website, and I found quite a nice little biography of him. So under that link to the story, I put the little biography of him. And I thought the final kind of paragraph says, McNabb's curious mixture of Celtic mysticism and Scottish common sense antagonised many, but his proposals for native welfare would, if adopted, have saved much agony. His name is still revered in the tribal traditions of the Northwest. So good on him. Good on him. So it's good to know about these people. Okay, so the next story I've got is Holyrood Review's support of Canada's Scottish founding father over Indigenous controversy. It says funding for a celebration of the Glasgow-born father of the Canadian nation could be withdrawn by the Scottish Government amid ongoing controversies over his treatment of Indigenous people. So it's interesting to read that, but I've also given you a link to an actual biography of him as well, because I have to say he did a huge amount. I mean, these residential schools are just a very small part of his legacy, basically, which is why I definitely object to taking his statue down as they've done in Vancouver, apparently. I mean, for example, the Canadian Pacific Railroad wouldn't have been built if it wasn't for a lot of the work that he put into that. And that is what brought Canada together. And frankly, I think that dwarfs anything he did on the Indigenous schools. But anyway, I've given you information which you can make up your own mind. But I don't think we should accept what people tell us and need to do our own research on these things. Okay, so the next story I have for you is leaving the EU on WTO terms, pulling down the barriers to world trade, why prices will fall after Brexit, not rise. There's so many scare stories going on about Brexit at the moment. I mean, if you think about it, the scare stories were just legion when we had the big referendum a couple of years back now. And I mean, from Obama to all world leaders to Bank of England, and everyone was saying it would be disastrous for us. Whereas every single measure you can take is now a lot better than it was when we did the referendum, which just goes to show this just and frankly, most of us refuse to believe these scare stories. So I don't see we should be accepting them now. But I mean, people are worried over WTO terms, but there's really nothing to worry about. And you need to read those articles so you get the balance right. Then another story which I read, which I've covered in the past, is third of farmed fruit and veg deemed too ugly to sell. It says more than a third of farmed fruit and vegetables never reaches supermarket shelves because it is misshapen or the wrong size, according to new research. So this is where a lot of wasted food goes, So again, I like these kind of articles. Next one is Scottish Chippy goes viral after offering monster crunchy box for a tenner. Scottish Chippy has created a massive debate online after he posted offering a mammoth family crunchy box for a tenner on Facebook. Looks very good. I would enjoy eating that if I was there, that's for sure. So maybe if you're going to Scotland for a holiday, try and pop in there and get one of these nice crunchy boxes. Then next story is Orkney tidal turbine generating phenomenal results. A flagship tidal energy turbine has generated more electricity in its first year than Scotland's entire wave and tidal sector produced before it. I mean, that's a really positive story, and it's got great implications. And basically, if you're reading the news, you would see that most of the wind turbines, in fact all of the wind turbines in Scotland, aren't made in Scotland. But this is an opportunity for us to actually make these tidal energy turbines in Scotland. So I hope Scotland gets its act together and actually gives us that benefit. Yeah, the next story is, yes, this really is the best fish supper money can buy. The Bay in Stonehaven, the town that gave us the deep fried Mars bar, was last week voted Britain's top food destination. I mean, Britain's top food destination in Stonehaven. Great. Lovely story, that. Then, giving the World Pipe Band Championship, this is a link to the BBC's coverage, which I have to say this year has been absolutely brilliant. Normally, you go to the BBC and you're hard put to watch anything. But this time they've given you the winning medley, which is about 7 minutes, I think, in length. And it's Field Marshal Montgomery. They won it this year. But they've got lots of other 5-7 minute clips of a lot of the other pipe bands. So if you're into pipe band music, that's going to be a feast for you for sure. Next story is Scottish Government to open a new office in Canada. It says the Scottish Government is to open a new office in Canada to strengthen economic ties between the two countries. So always nice to see Scotland and Canada working together. Next story is Donald Trump invests $63 million into Lossiemouth to combat Russian submarine threat. Said America has reported a huge rise in Russian sub-activity in the seas around Scotland, amid growing tension between the West and Vladimir Putin's regime, as experts warn of a new Cold War. So again, that's rather an interesting story. Then of course we've got GERS and the Scottish budget. I'm sure our friend Kevin Haig at Chock-a-Blog will be doing a story about this when he analyses the figures, but this is an initial one from Sceptical Scotland. So the GERS, as the Government Expenditure and Revenue Report, shows a net fiscal balance, including a geographical share of North Sea oil in Scotland, of minus 13.4 billion, or minus 7.9% of Scottish GDP for 2017-18. This compares with a UK balance of 39.4, or minus 1.9 of UK GDP. Then Jacob Rees-Mogg pens an explosive Chuck Chequers letter to turn Tory grassroots against May's plan. It says influential Tory backbencher Jacob Rees-Mogg has ramped up his opposition to the Prime Minister's Brexit plan by writing an explosive letter to local Conservative Association chairman and his parliamentary colleagues, urging them to chuck Chequers. And actually he does an item-by-item rebuttal on everything that Theresa May raised in her letter, which one of the previous newsletters, I gave you a link to the whole letter that she sent out. So this is a point-by-point rebuttal. And then No Deal Brexit Papers. There's a full list of the published documents setting out no deal scenarios for the UK. Pardon me. For the UK. Apparently it's to be 90 odd papers. And this is the first tranche of them. So this link takes you to where the documents are, and you can click links on that site to actually read the documents themselves. So that's a good, it's a good site if you want to look for that kind of stuff. And that's the coverage I've got for you this week on the Scottish news front. Then on to Electric Canadian. We've got another volume up of the Canada and its provinces. It's Volume 9. It's the Dominion Industrial Expansion Part 2. And then another edition of the Engineering Journal has gone up, this time for 1950. And actually this includes planning the national capital, which on its own I think would make a very interesting, we read that, because it shows how it was laid out and how it was organised. Then I got a 1902 copy of the Mining Review up. And then a nice little book, Oh Canada. It's a medley of stories, verse, pictures and music contributed by the members of the Canadian Expeditionary Force in 1916. Then I've got The Story of the Canadian People. It's by David M. Duncan. It was authorised for use in the provinces of Manitoba, Ontario and British Columbia. So a rather interesting account there. Then I've got, next one's Sir Frederick Haldeman. It's by Jean M. McElraith, which I've added to our Makers of Canada section, so a good biography there. Then we've got Hesperius and Other Poems and Lyrics by George Sangster, Canadian poet. So that's an interesting wee read. And then finally I've got The Little Manitoban, a child's storybook. It was issued in Christmas 1900. This actual book encompasses about 40 different stories. They're all short stories. And what I've done is I've taken one of them as an example, just as an example, and made it the story of this week. So I hope you enjoy reading that one. But certainly there's tons more nice to me. And I certainly read quite a few of them and thoroughly enjoyed them. Then on to Electric Scotland. I've got The Castles and Keeps of Scotland. It's being a description of sundry fortresses, towers, peals and other houses of strength built by the princes and barons of old time in the Highlands, islands, inlands and borders of the ancient and God-fearing Kingdom of Scotland. It's by Frank Roy Frappry. Then next one is Memoir of the late Reverend Alexander Stewart. He's one of the ministers of Canongate in Edinburgh, to which are subjoined a few of his sermons. It's the second edition, so obviously a popular read. Albert Road Academy of Glasgow. Now this is a story in its own right, because I was contacted to see if I'd be prepared to take a copy of this site onto Electric Scotland, as it seems there's a concern the site may go down. And so I agreed, and have spent the last couple of days publishing this onto the site. It's actually, it was a whole weekend I spent on this, maybe working 9 hours a day basically, because it's a lot of work to get all the information over, and a lot of the graphics, you couldn't save the graphics. So I had to do screen captures and all kinds of things. And some of the names are running together, so you couldn't index them, so I put spaces so they can be indexed now. So a lot of work went into this, but I'm happy to do it because it's the kind of information that I think needs to be preserved for future generations. Then the next section I've got is Ancient Towers and Doorways. It's being a pictorial representation and restorations of masoncraft relating to Celtic and Norman ecclesiology in Scotland. It's from pen drawings by the late Alexander Gilletley, with appreciation and descriptions by Andrew Taylor. So quite interesting that. It's always nice when you get little pictures of that coming up. Just fixed the spelling mistake I noticed. Then I've got Ancient Towers in the North of Scotland. This is just a one-page article from an old magazine, and anyway, I thought it was pretty good, and I thought I'll add that to the site because it's interesting that. Then I've got Tributes to Abraham Lincoln. The reason I put this up is this excerpts from newspapers and other sources providing testimonials lauding the 16th President of the United States. It's from Great Britain and Canada, from the files of the Lincoln Financial Foundation collection. So I thought that was rather interesting. Then Dr. John McLachlan, he's a Gaelic poet and doctor. The information about him is in English, but the poems are in the Gaelic language. So if you speak Gaelic, you've got a bonus there. If you don't, then at least you can read about him. He's quite an interesting character, this, actually. Then I put up a book called Discourse. It's containing a summary of the proceedings of the directors of the Society for Extending the Fisheries and Improving the Sea Coast of Great Britain since the 25th of March 1788, and some thoughts on the present emigrations from the Highlands by George Dempster. This is one of, because of the date of production of this book, it's one where the letter S is written as a letter F. So it makes it a little challenging to read, but frankly, you don't need to be reading it for very long before you get into the habit of reading it okay. And I think it's well worth an effort here because there's some great information in this. And the final one is Genealogy of the McKinstry family. I found it obviously meant to put this up because when I went to add it to the site, there's a link to that actual book, but when you click on the link, it just goes to a web page with a one-liner on it. So I obviously made a mistake at the time, so I've corrected that, and now when you click on that link, it'll go directly to the book itself. And it's actually, it's not a big book, maybe 40 odd pages, but the first several pages gives you a little background on the creation of the Scots-Irish and how they ended up in America. So it's quite a good summary, and if you don't like reading huge histories, then that's actually a really good read, so I would recommend you have a look at that. And then, as I mentioned to you, the story for this week is The Little Manitoban Book, and it's quite a nice wee story. And again, a lot of these books were written in those days, always had a bit of a moral thought to them, which try to teach you things, you know. So I hope you enjoy that. And that's basically it for this week. So, hope you enjoy the newsletter, and as always, under this video I'll put a link to the actual newsletter which you can download and get all the links to the stories I've told you about. Okay, thanks for listening, and look forward to getting any comments from you. Thanks.